Hey, this is Kerry King, and you are watching Metalshop TV. Yeah, I made a point to be there all day at the Back to the Beginning show. My friends in Mastodon were playing like first, so I wanted to, see them. I know Hailstorm was playing early. I wanted to see them. I saw Alice in Chains sound check the day before. I watched Ozzy and Black Sabbath play. They had something set up like a giant LED screen backstage with its own PA. So I just parked myself right in front of it, and I had basically a front row seat to the whole show for those two. I was on stage for Metallica. It's a good day, It's like when you do a festival like we're doing today. A lot of the times I don't know who we're playing with, but I knew Back to the Beginning for months, so I had a whole day planned out to watch my friends play, and it was cool, and with Ozzy passing away very soon thereafter, I'm very happy that I was able to be a part of that. Probably would have been in the late 90s, because when they were testing Ozfest, we did all the original ones when they were like 1 gig or 2 gigs, just to maybe Southern California and Phoenix, just to see if it was a feasible idea. So I'm assuming it was around then, but I don't have that memory. For as many Ozfests as we did, it seemed like we were always on ones around the time when the Osbournes was a popular TV show. And when we were on the tour, it just, I never saw any of them. It's like they were ghosts. I remember at one of the hotels, because sometimes all the bands stayed in the same hotel, and Sabbath was in our dressing room. Sabbath was in our hotel. And I opened my door, and Tony goes walking down the hallway with, I'm sure, his bodyguard and whoever. And I was such a fan, I just put my head down and said, "Hey, Tony," try to be cool, not be, pain in the ass. But years later, we were around each other more often, and I'm not sure we became friends, but we became more than acquaintances, And he's one of my superheroes, so it was tough for me to get over that hump. It's funny because that record's it was done like a year before it came out, and usually when I do new material, it becomes my workout music, when I go to the gym, and then it lasts maybe 2-3 months, and I get tired of it. But this record, my new record, From Hell I Rise, is still what I work out to. I love that record. It's fun to play. I love the guys I'm playing with. And this time, coming through Europe, people know it a lot more. Like the first time we came through, it had been out maybe a month. And there's people that had their favorite songs and would sing songs back at us. Now, like when we go and do off-fest shows, when we're like headlining a show someplace, people are singing all the lyrics back to us. It's super cool. Yeah, absolutely. I got to keep my guys employed because we're no spring chickens. There's only so many go-arounds we're going to get a chance to be a part of, so I want to keep busy and keep my guys busy. I would guess 2026, because we're already 2025. And we want to get in and record sooner than later. So whenever it's done, then it goes to the business part. When does the record company want to put it out? I know when I'd like to have it out, but I don't know if that's when they'd like to put it out. So I'm not even going to say yet, but next year, hopefully earlier than later. I was of the opinion that if you like Slayer, you're gonna like this. You know, I'm not hiding the fact that I was in Slayer. I'm not trying to sound different than Slayer because that's what I spent my whole life doing, my whole fucking life. So anybody that thought this was gonna sound different than Slayer, just, they weren't thinking correctly, you know. I mean, I wrote 95% of Repentless, and that was the last Slayer album. So what do you think it's gonna sound like? You know? I do think that it sounds a little different for whatever reason. You know, that they're certainly not mirror images of each other. So I think this one, it's got a, maybe say for instance, if I write music and I'm like this, I think in my band I kind of went like that a little bit. You know, it's got a little more things that I never would have done in Slayer for whatever reason. You know, there were no rules, but I had my unspoken rules, I guess. And then with this, you know, I don't want to say I had more freedom because I never made myself not free, but it just seems like there were more pieces to put this puzzle together. It's really hard to say, and I've got reasoning for both sides of that answer because Slayer stopped playing in 19, so I didn't play on stage for 5 years. But I played with a lot of other bands. I played with Rob Zombie, I played with Pantera, I've done it a lot. But then when this came out, I don't know if it was because I'd been off 5 years or it was playing with 3 new people, or a little bit of both, but it wasn't like riding a bike. You know, it wasn't, you know, once you got this, you got this. It took us probably until, I think, the US tour earlier this year when we were headlining and playing a lot. I think that's when we finally gelled. It just took a while. It's not because anything was weird about anything on stage, it was just, you know, learning how to interact with these guys and learning how to land on a set list that we're all digging and excited to play every night. But now it's a machine for sure. Oh yeah, all these guys are my friends. And that was more important to me than anything else. So I'm like, at this point in my career and this point in my life, I want to be cruising with my friends, and I know there's not going to be any divas in the bunch. We all get along great. Luckily, they can all play the shit out of their instruments, so that was just a bonus, actually. Yeah, it was most important to me to get to, you know, be with guys I like to hang around with, and you know, we can finish a show, joke about things, have a shot, and, you know, listen to music on the bus. Honestly, it was a product of the pandemic because a lot of people, you know, took that time off to just, you know, be uncertain about the world and their future. And I did the opposite, and I played a lot. Because I'm like, I'm gonna take this downtime to work on my music because I know I wanna put something out. I didn't know yet at the beginning of the pandemic who everybody was gonna be in the band. I had a pretty good idea, but you know, I didn't have commitments, I didn't have guys. I don't even know, actually I do know, the one that got the gig last was Mark, and I didn't tell Mark he had the gig until like 2 months before we recorded. He would come down and do demos with myself and Paul. Before he even had the gig, he would come down just because he's my friend, and you know, he would sing all the lyrics, and you know, we would better him all the time. And you know, one day he was hanging with me in Vegas. I said, you know what? If you still want the gig, you got it. And he was so excited. He texted his mom, and he ended up texting me. I got his mom's message, and I write back, "Love you too, bro." It was funny, but he was legitimately stoked that he got it, and you know, for somebody to be that excited, where you got to tell your mom, like, you know, you made the right choice. I don't know. I just kind of tend to write like that anyway. You know, if it was, you know, a weekend of football, I'd still write angry shit. Well, I mean, I've been around a long time, and, you know, I might be old-fashioned in saying I still like albums. To where a lot of bands will put out a handful of tracks and go tour, put out a handful of tracks and go tour. I'm still of the opinion that, you know, albums, CDs, cassettes, because they sell cassettes now, again, and metal fans are very into having hard copies. You know, I think it's the closest knit community that there is in music, metal, thrash metal, especially. It's very, like, it's not one of those musics that if your parents like it, you don't like it. If you're a kid, you know, chances are you probably all like it because it's very family driven. Like when you go see the fans today, you look out there and there'll be teenagers, there'll be people over 60. You know, and it's cool that they're all there. They're all enjoying the same thing. Also, like, you know, if you have other older siblings, you know, it's the same kind of thing. If you're a metal kid, chances are your younger brother and sister are going to be metal kids, and your parents are probably one or the other or both metal people. But you see entire families of people in all across generations coming out. So I think it's very tight knit. I have no idea. I mean, even though I am starting over, my name still carries some heat, you know, so it's not completely starting over. People have an idea who I am. People have an idea what I'm going to sound like. Now, if it was just a new band with new musicians, man, you'd have to have a record agency machine pushing it, you know, because you got to get the word out there. Because now, you know, Slayer does a handful of shows every year. So if you hear my name, you can start making that connection. So if you didn't know, you know, now you know I'm doing both things, and, you know, come see us both. It's fun. It's different, like I said, it's a different animal, but it's both fulfilling and super awesome, I think. If I wasn't a musician, I really hope I have enough money not to work. What am I going to do? Get into a new career at 60 years old? That don't sound fun at all. What would I do? You know, I'm a big American football fan, so maybe I'd figure out a way to get into some aspect of football, from a commentator to a guy that just does, you know, sideline blurbs, just maybe something like that, because that's the only other thing I really enjoy, you know. I can't imagine doing anything else. It probably would have been the early days before before I did a lot of interviews, because when I do interviews, I go for it. You know, I'm not making anything up. But in the early days, there are so many things. We were Nazi fascist, Satan worshipers, among other things. And yeah, I write songs about the devil, but to me, it's like writing short stories for a horror movie. You know, do I believe the devil's going to come back and from hell I rise? No. But I wrote that in a perspective of myself, actually. And that you can call that hell Slayer, you can call that hell the pandemic, but I rose from it, and this is my record, and that's what I called it. Do I think, do I believe the words to Crucifixation? Not one of them, but it's a great song. You know, I write for entertainment, and I make sure people know that, so I don't mislead anybody and, you know, give people fuel for the fire of, you know, saying we're all about this, we're all about that. No, I'm going to tell you straight up, I'm an atheist, but it's not fun to write about. I don't know if I didn't know and learned along the way, but I think the most important thing is to make music that you like yourself. Because if you try to make music for other people, sooner or later the fans are going to see through it. That's in my opinion. And luckily, I have always been in a band that I'm very into the music. I'm still a metal kid, you know. If I put music on that's not my own, I put on metal, you know, maybe rock, like, you know, Van Halen perspective, something like that. But still heavy music. And, you know, like I said, from day one to now, I'm still coming up with music that I'm very much into, and luckily a lot of other people are into it as well, so it just works. But if I had to try for a second to fit into another genre, even if I made up the best song ever, eventually somebody would see through me.